Hi Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Rod. Here we are again. Another week has passed, and it's the 12th of March.
It is the 12th of March. I'm going to apologise right off the bat for how awful I sounded last week. And if you were eagerly looking for the video, it wasn't there because I wouldn't have subjected anybody to the snotty mess that I was. So I apologise unreservedly for there not being one. I think I got all the coughs, sneezes and sniffles out of the audio. I was quite cautious about that, but the video died. So we're going to try something slightly different with the video this week. We'll see if that works or not. But apologies.
Yeah, I feel a bit bad for putting you through it last week. And we're delayed this week by a day because I couldn't make yesterday's recording. And, well, let's say it's episode 111, and let's dive into follow-up, because I thought, actually, in a way, it might be good if we didn't record yesterday, because apparently Apple were going to announce some new iPads. That's what Mark Gurman originally said. There was going to be a minor update to something last week. There was. We had the MacBook Air M3, and then this week there'll be something bigger. I thought, great, I'm on for my iPad. All the signs are looking like we're getting iPads, but they haven't announced anything really today. So bad days. So Rod, apologies for putting you through it last week. Sorry I couldn't record last night, but at least we're here today and off we go.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, no new iPads. I got to say I can't get terribly excited about that. For me, as I've said a million times before, it's more about the software than the hardware at this point. Yeah, they need to sort out the lineup, but that's not what Tim Cook's Apple does. They don't sort out the lineup. They just add more things to an ever-confusing lineup. So maybe next week.
I've got faith. I think I just want some new tech because I haven't bought any new tech for a long time, like good tech. So I'm waiting with bated breath.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Should we dive on? We've got quite a lot of follow-up to get through this week, and most of it, one of the other podcasts I follow have got a section now called DMA Watch, where they talk about all the changes within the Digital Markets Act that's brought to Apple. We haven't got that, but we're going to end up talking about the DMA a little bit. It's slightly out of sequence in our show notes, so I'm going to jump straight ahead to early last week, Apple terminated Epic's developer account. So we talked the week before about how it had been reinstated within Sweden. I think it was Epic had applied for a new developer account that had been granted under the terms of the new EU thing, and then very quickly afterwards, like 2 days afterwards, there was a diktat from Apple saying, no, you're banned, you're Epic, we have a bad relationship with you. There was a sequence of emails purported to be from Phil Schiller within Apple and then to Epic saying, you're bad actors, we don't trust you, you've broken our faith before, you're out. And that caused a certain amount of controversy within the Apple community because, hang about, all bets are off. This isn't the Apple App Store. This is a new EU-based marketplace. What are you doing? So, did you follow that story up to this point?
Not a huge amount, but Apple just never comes off well, does it, when you see any of this internal email wranglings and shenanigans? It makes you a little embarrassed to be a fan of what they do sometimes.
It really does. And there was a whole bunch of stuff, starting with Epic posting on a blog post. We recently announced that Apple approved our Epic Games Sweden AB developer account. We intend to use that account to bring the Epic Games Store and Fortnite to iOS devices in Europe, thanks to the DMA. To our surprise, Apple has terminated that account, and now we cannot develop the Epic Games Store for iOS. This is a serious violation of the DMA and shows Apple has no intention of allowing true competition on iOS devices. So it goes on and on a little bit, and Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic, has a whole bunch of stuff. And in his tweet, he actually post, whatever they're called these days, posts a picture of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, developing it and the respect he has for Apple platforms. So there's a bit of gamesmanship going on here. But it all came back to, and I'm frantically scrolling through the article to find Apple's quote. Apple's response to this was, Epic's egregious breach of its contractual obligations to Apple led courts to determine that Apple has the right to terminate any or all of Epic Games' wholly owned subsidiaries, affiliates, and or other entities under Epic Games' control at any time and at Apple's sole discretion. In light of Epic's past and ongoing behavior, Apple chose to exercise this right. So that particular response really upset a lot of people, and we're going to quote Steve Troughton-Smith a couple of times, but the basic premise of this is, no, it didn't. That was in America, not in the EU. So there's no court judgments against Epic in the EU. So you can't apply US law within the EU, Apple. Bad.
Yeah, I don't know what to say on it. It's just, the whole thing's just ridiculous, isn't it? And you're going to get criticism externally, and you're going to have to live with it sometimes, Apple, because that's life. You're never going to please everybody, let alone anybody. So, it's just bonkers, isn't it? The world has gone slightly mad. I can believe this. I thought when Epic said we're going to do, we're going to do a marketplace. It felt like they'd buried the hatchet with Apple, and we'd moved on a little bit. But yeah, it's a shame Apple have made all this happen.
Yeah, and then the next sort of chapter in the story was there was the EU MP that actually floated the idea of the Digital Markets Act, who I think is a German MEP, not MP, MEP, posted a tweet saying, "What's going on, Apple?" with a little red light emoji, which obviously made Apple go, this DMA, there has been no enforcement of it. We've just been fined 1.8 billion euros. Maybe we want to think about this. So it led to, obviously, that it was being questioned by EU regulators, Apple backtracking. So a couple of days later, we then get this post from from Epic Games saying that their developer account has been reinstated. Following conversations with Epic, they've committed to follow the rules, including our DMA policies. Apple said the statement provided to Ars Technica. As a result, Epic Sweden AB has been permitted to re-sign the developer agreement and been accepted into the Apple Developer Program. This is just the most ridiculous flip-flopping, this does not seem like the biggest company in the world kind of behaviour. This is like a school child having a tantrum.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? And must be a nightmare for Epic. They're trying to, motivate their teams, develop a marketplace, get their, products ready to sell, and yet they've got all this flip-flopping going on. It must be a really disconcerting place to be, because at the moment we haven't got anybody doing a marketplace. So really, we need people like Epic to do it and to prove that this is going to work.
Yeah, and that's a nice segue, thank you, Chris, to Steve Troughton Smith quote about this reversal by Apple. And again, I'm reading a lot tonight, but I think it's important. Apple's reversal on the Epic situation is all well and good, but it doesn't prevent this kind of thing from happening again to a smaller developer who doesn't have a ton of PR or the ear of the EC. And it does highlight that Apple still has all the control to do whatever it wants with little oversight under its proposed DMA plan. They have forcibly inserted themselves in between third-party app stores, payment providers, and those services' users, free to turn the screws as they wish. And that is the crux of it, isn't it? Epic have got a lot of weight, they've got a lot of money. I don't really care about two big corporations fighting, but it's the childishness of Apple within the situation that other people don't have that kind of power to be able to go to the EC complain, like a Spotify, like an Epic. And that has got to put all the developers on edge. At the time, they're on edge anyway, and just make you think, well, why would I develop for the Apple Vision Pro? They can just, they can be, as random as they like in the application of their own rules.
Yeah, especially if you were trying to build your business around this and you're a small developer and you're going to use this to fund your business. You could have a store up and running and then Apple just stop you dead in your tracks because you said you didn't agree with something. I think it's bad. It's bad on Apple that it comes to this. They're going straight for the nuclear terminate option rather than probably having a meaningful discussion. Maybe why don't you ask them to take the post down and have that discussion before going to the disable one, because it doesn't feel right. It feels like they're abusing their power.
It does, and it's like one strike and you're out, really. All right, what Epic did was wrong. It breached the rules of the App Store. But one strike and you're out? That's not fair. That's not on. So all this is sort of summing up to say that Eve Gruber has written a reasonably long post about this, and, we come and go on Gruber a little bit. But he posted two theories about why Apple did what they did. The first one was this is grandmaster level stuff to show that they can respond to the power of the EU. Or more likely, theory B, Apple is flailing erratically trying to deal with their loss of autonomy. And I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, they're losing their power and they've got to get used to that.
Well, they've had too much of it for too long. And the fact that they think they own 30% of every dollar, pound, euro spent via the App Store isn't right. Yeah, they invented the widget, but the App Store would not be what it is without all these developers that built these amazing apps back in the day. It's a symbiotic relationship, and Apple seems to believe all developers are parasites. And that's not the way it should go.
No, not at all. They both need each other, and they need to work out how they make that work better.
They do, because we've already looked at devices like the Humane Pin and the Rabbit R1 that are web-based and make use of the existing websites for things. GPT and large language models and large action models are going to change this interaction potentially. That's probably why there's so much money in the market at the moment, apart from all the various other things that we've talked about at the moment. Apple need to be super careful that they don't, have regulators against them, developers against them, because users will turn very shortly afterwards.
Yeah, that is true. How long could they hold on like this? I don't know. It's going to be interesting, isn't it?
They have all the money in the world, but, there we go. In one sign that they are sort of realizing that maybe things aren't going quite the way they hoped it would, today, just before we record the show, Apple has posted that they will allow users to download apps directly from a developer's website in the EU. So that's quite a big deal, really.
I didn't see this coming. I was amazed this kind of came out of nowhere. And they've said that it's in response to feedback. And so there's a couple of things in this article we've linked to. One being that for a marketplace, you don't have to sell other people's things. You can just sell your things on your marketplace, if that makes sense. So Meta could have a Meta marketplace and just sell Meta apps or distribute Meta apps, should we say? That is a change. It's weird though that they've backtracked on that decision after everything's gone live, but they have, and obviously they've probably been encouraged to do so. And then the other one is developers that are basically in good standing with Apple can distribute apps over the web. And there's a few things to that. You've got to have the web, with your developer. You've got to develop the app with your developer account. You've got to, publish transparent data collection. You've got to be enrolled in the program. Basically, you've just got to be a good developer, and then you can put your app up on the website and allow people to download it directly, which I'm amazed they are allowing, because that feels like a step further than the marketplace piece. So technically, people can just put their app up on their website, which just seems amazing to me. Like, I just can't believe that's going to happen.
Well, they still need to have met all the other terms of, having put the bond with Apple for €1 million and, paying Apple back 30%, 50 cents on the euro for all those things. So there's still all those sides of requirements, but they can. Obviously, somebody in the EU has gone, no, you have absolutely missed the point of what we were trying to do with the DMA, and they're frantically adjusting what they thought was what they hoped was a set in stone policy to get this up and running.
Yeah, I wonder if any of this is going to change, like WWDC, where they're going to have to delay anything, because they've got to obviously get all this coding done. It'll be interesting to see whether there's a knock-on impact, I guess.
Yeah, and then the last piece in this that dropped was how these alternative app stores will stop working if you're outside of the EU for more than a month. So that, again, to me is an incredible thing. You could legitimately go on holiday, on business, on whatever reason and leave the EU, still be an EU citizen. But your app will stop updating because you've had the gall to leave the EU area? What the hell?
Yeah, that's a bit bizarre. Surely that should just work off your Apple account. Are you an EU Apple account holder? Because that seems to be how most other things work. I've no idea how that works if you turn on a VPN and dial back into Europe, as it were. If you're, in America or in Australia, it'd be interesting to know. But yeah, it just seems a bit bonkers.
It does seem to be geofenced in some way, so it can't just be. Otherwise, we would be VPNing into Switzerland or whatever to try out some of these app stores, wouldn't we? If it gives us more freedom on our phones, I think there's got to be some element of GPS, a mix of where your credit card is or your bank is based, and where your network is at that point. So it's probably more complicated than we think it is.
Yeah, that's fair. They probably are maybe like triangulating on a few different metrics to work it out, but the whole thing just seems not fantastic.
No. So there's lots of links in the show notes to go and have a look about this, but it has just been the most roller coaster week, I think, for Apple News, and trying to keep track of just one thing of what they were doing with the DMA here. And again, I said at the top, this is in the light of them just having had a €2 billion fine. The first thing you do after being the first company to be fined for being in breach of the anti-steering regulations is you immediately antagonize the EU by doing this kind of stuff. My mind is blown.
My mind is and isn't. I think Apple still have their swagger or arrogance, and it's going to take them time to be a bit more humble, I think.
It's hard to do that when everything you've done so far has been right and made you so much money, and I think they are very dependent now on that App Store revenue, the 30% cut of everything that they get, because it's a business that just keeps growing. As long as they sell iPhones to people, people are going to pay it.
Yeah, it's been their, I'm not going to say cash cow, but up there, with the iPhone hardware sales, and then this on top is led the way for Apple over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, very much. Anyway, that was it for follow-up from me. Did you have anything you wanted to chuck in there?
No, I'm still sad about the iPads. Let's move on to news.
Let's move on to news. And a tech-adjacent story, really, that if you lived in the UK or probably anywhere in the world, I think there's quite a lot of royal watchers in America as well, about our monarchy being rocked by a bad Photoshop job. So this is a bit of a weird story in the sense that Kate Middleton, who is Princess of Wales, no relation, well, probably some relation, but I've never really thought about it anyway, posted a Photoshop. She had some surgery a few months ago and then sort of vanished from public life. And this was their first public photo that had been posted since this mysterious surgery that took place. It was posted to a number of press agencies, including AP and others. And very quickly thereafter, they withdrew the photo for it being an obvious Photoshop job.
I feel really bad for them because to me it feels like they're trying to do a nice thing here, post a picture on Mother's Day of the Prince of Wales with her 3 children. What a great thing to do. We haven't seen her, for a couple of months. It's great they've done it. She looks very well in the picture. There's obviously something going on here, but I just find the whole thing bananas that it's blown up in the way it has. I do wonder what the original looked like. Is it just a minor Photoshop? Maybe, that I think there was something around her daughter. Maybe her daughter had like a mark on her clothing or something. Do you know what I mean? Because kids do. It's hard to have kids looking pristine and to get 3 kids looking at the camera, smiling. We've all tried to do it, I think, with our families. So is it just something minor or is there something more serious around it? It's hard to know, isn't it? I just find the whole thing bizarre. But it felt to me that like they were generally posting a nice picture and it's just blown up 2 days later.
Yeah, I mean, I get why authenticated press agencies like AP don't want to post Photoshop jobs.
No, I get that. I do get that. But I do think the royals either should have posted, we photoshopped it, here's the original, look, everything's fine. Because otherwise you just got all the conspiracy theories going now, haven't you?
It's an own goal, is what it is.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it, actually. It is a home goal, isn't it?
There's a couple of things I find surprising about it. One is she took it herself. And she posted it herself, and she photoshopped it herself. And I would have thought the royals are people for that. Everybody likes to dick around with a bit of tech. We've all had to play with Photoshop, and I guess she's no different from that. Maybe she's had time in her convalescent period to do a little bit more of this kind of stuff. So maybe that's genuine. But I'm slightly surprised for a firm that is so careful with their image that they would post this kind of thing themselves, really, and edit it themselves.
Did they though?
Because, that's the story.
Maybe that's the story, but maybe they have messed up the photoshopping of it because it's not easy to photoshop something like that, especially when you've got children and hair and hands and it's just that's tough Photoshop. I don't know, I just find the whole thing bizarre. Surely somebody else took the photo. They all look like what you set a timer of 10, 9, and the phone's flashing ready to take the photo. I don't know, it's a very good photo, so I would imagine they've got somebody professional there.
But this is part of the thing, isn't it? I can't believe we're going to spend as long talking about this. I thought this would be a quick disposable story. But there's been one theory I've read. This is actually taken in November last year, and it's a composite of a number of photos because you never get 3 kids looking that engaged at the camera at the same time. As somebody with children trying to get 2 kids and 2 adults potentially engaged looking at the camera at the same time. So, yeah, I kind of believe that a little bit, but
looking at the camera, smiling. Yeah, no, it's a feat of magic, to be fair. But, it is what it is, isn't it? But I think they've tried to do a nice thing, and it's a shame it's blown up in the way it has.
It has. Should we move on?
Yes.
Moving on, the Eurocloud Consortium has issued an ultimatum to Microsoft. So we've talked about this a couple of times in the past. Microsoft's pricing for Azure being way on left field compared to what some of the other ones are doing and fixing the market because people are very much embedded in the Microsoft cloud. And this is just Redmond refusing to move really on that pricing. So this is the EU casting an eye at them, and we're going to talk about the EU and Microsoft again in a little bit of time. But this is quite interesting that they're sort of coming down on this as well to try and improve competition in all markets. They're not just picking on Apple here, are they?
No, they're not, and Microsoft do have a bit of a monopoly in this space. I think this is a common problem in that cloud compute is only going one way, and it's really hard as somebody that controls a budget for a corporation. It's really hard to forecast what your budget's going to be year on year because the costs go up, the data requirements go up. But obviously once you're in, it's then hard to go, actually, no, I'm going to pick up my ball and go and play with another vendor. So, it is good that it's not just, like you said, the likes of Apple getting investigated, that it is big old Microsoft too.
Yeah, and you do want a level playing field for this because there's this, and then there's AI, and as you say, most big companies and even smaller ones are moving to cloud first. Whether that will continue, it's expensive to maintain a data center. The LLMs moving data into clouds and back again, and all that kind of stuff as well makes it really complicated. I think Broadcom and VMware have shown us that you need to be slightly tentative about vendor lock-in to one particular platform. So yeah, I think it's well and good that the EU are looking at this, and the FTC should do the same in America.
Yeah, and obviously Broadcom, I think we've reported it, they're going the same way, aren't they? Prices are going one way.
Yeah, and that's been following that on YouTube, and we're going to talk about alternatives to VMware and things like that later on for in the main show. But yeah, it's not gone down well in the community, and some businesses, including us as a university, who have invested quite heavily in VMware products, now have a problem that's going to cost us a huge amount of money as educators and researchers. And if it's hitting the university sector like that, what's it doing to the NHS, to private companies, to anybody that makes use of VMware in a fairly heavy way is going to be massively affected by this, with a budgetary constraint that they were not expecting at all. If Microsoft decide to do the same thing and jack the prices up one year, nothing's to stop them. It's a company in its own right. So sometimes I think regulation makes sense.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not the cost of getting in, it's the cost of getting out that is not usually considered.
No. Moving on, and I included this story just for the lols as much as anything else. LLMs we've talked about repeatedly on the show. I've had an interesting rich vein recently of seeing if you can run them on-prem rather than having them on cloud, but I just thought the name of this one was funny. We've talked a couple of times about LLMs getting legal stories wrong and citing incorrect law in American court cases. Well, now there's a specific legal LLM called Sol, M-7B, and it's presumably named after the lawyer Saul from the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul shows.
That's the only reason why you liked it. To me, A, I haven't seen those shows. I'm aware of them. But B, I thought this was quite interesting because I think in the short term this makes sense, because it's really hard to get generalist AI to be a master of everything, because it ends up as very much not a master of anything. And so this does make sense that you train a model on specific types of documents, type ways of working, links, content, and then it will be a real master in that area. So I think this is probably a good idea, and it's more practical use of LLMs in the short term, that we have specific ones for niches, and then maybe over time they converge and get bigger and you get more generalist. But I think there's just so much compute required that having targeted ones makes a lot of sense, especially something like legal documents and those special area domains, as it were.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, we think about this in terms of research and patient data and all that kind of stuff that you can't put in the cloud, and a lot of law stuff is fairly open source. Legal precedent is cited in court cases both in America and around the world. So an accurate model is very important if you're going to start to use it. And let's face it, we're all going to start to use this stuff in one way, shape, or form in all of our industries. So there's a quote in this that, you try and wonder what to make about these things. Schwartz, the company, said he was not yet ready to comment to the extent which his offering will be open source or proprietary, but he claimed that while Sol M7B Instruct, a fine-tuned version on general legal instructions, managed to score an average of 0.61 on the legal bench Instruct benchmark. What the hell is that? We're getting close to 0.77, but that accuracy percentage is similar to GPT-4. So GPT-4, we have agreed, isn't that accurate. It's less accurate than that. So, but at least it's starting from a better corpus.
But they've got to start somewhere, haven't they? And if this is the worst it's going to be, it's going to get better. You've just got to keep iterating, and it will get there.
Absolutely. Moving on. But sticking with legal challenges, this one to Apple. Apple has made a last-minute plea to the Department of Justice not to file a US antitrust lawsuit. So this is similar to what we're talking about with anti-steering. It's related to Epic Games introducing its own payment system, bypassing app stores. Basically, the FTC think there's a monopoly going on with Apple. Shock horror, there is a monopoly going on with Apple for their app store. And they don't want to be investigated in the US in the same way they are in Europe. So we've already talked about how well that's going in Europe. Do you think it's going to go any better in America?
Unless there's any sympathies because they're an American company, no. I can see why Apple's lobbying, but it's not the right thing, is it? It's not the right thing to do at all.
I mean, they might get lucky with a change of president or something coming up that they might not be interested in these kind of antitrust cases, but that's not a future I really want to think about too hard right now. The moral of the story, the sort of takeaway from the story is Apple Incorporated representatives met with the Justice Department in a final bid to persuade the agency not to file the antitrust lawsuit, and we'll find out in about 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. Let's hope they get this one over the line before the next president comes in, because we could end up going backwards with the next president.
Yeah, seems likely. That's a very depressing topic. I think we'll move on and talk about another depressing topic. LastPass, which you and I both use as our password manager, and I was beginning to think about exploring some alternative things, has suffered a worldwide network outage causing 404 errors on the website. Now, I didn't see this myself because I used the app, but apparently it was down for quite a long time for quite a few people, and that's a bad look.
Not a good look. I don't use this, by the way. I use 1Password. So it's not a good look at all. LastPass has had a few issues, hasn't it, I think? Didn't they have a breach a while ago?
In fact, yeah, you're quite right. For some reason, I'm reading LastPass, but I'm thinking 1Password, and I'm the same. I use 1Password, not LastPass, and I left LastPass after the breach.
Right. Okay. So they've committed the two cardinal sins: an outage and a breach. That's not what you want, is it, from your password vault?
No, I'd say get away from LastPass would be the moral of that story.
Sadly, I do worry about 1Password with so many people going there. They've had, great reputation. They must be constantly battling to ensure everything's up, and the attacks they must be getting on a frequent basis. They must have quite a division to just protecting the estate.
Well, they've become ever more an enterprise app, so I'm sure they've got the money and the time to do it now.
Which I'm quite happy about, because you kind of want to put your passwords into something that's going to have a future, and people are paying to use it, and they're not just going to disappear overnight.
Very true. Moving on, we quite often have talked on this show about the deep integration between the Mac and our iOS and iPad devices. All the it's not continuity. Well, continuity camera is one of those things, actually, which I'm using right now to talk to you, and the viewers can see me waving at them on the camera, hopefully this week, unlike last week. Or, whether it's moving your cursor onto your iPad or the universal copy and paste and all the rest of it. And the ability these days to deploy widgets on our desktops that come from our phones or iPads. A few years ago, Microsoft built in Windows subsystem for Android into Windows, so you could make use of some of those features, such as being able to text on your Android phone from your Windows computer, and they made a big fuss about it. Anyway, they're killing it in 2025, which seems like an odd decision.
So it came out in 21. It does seem an odd decision, but then maybe the stats just say nobody's really using it, and it's why keep it forever, which Microsoft normally do keep stuff forever, but maybe it's just that one reason there. They need to shed some cruft that's nobody's using. So I respect them if nobody's using it, but it does feel like a backward step, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's more of a Google thing to just kill something. It's a Google product, Android, so maybe that's it.
Yeah, it was interesting. So my son has a Windows 11 laptop. He was like, "Dad, how do I sell it so that when I close the lid, it doesn't go to sleep?" And I said, "Oh, just go into settings. You'll be somewhere in there." And I typed in lid, and it brought up control panel from 15 years ago, which again just proves that point. Microsoft are not fantastic at moving things along. They do a bit of it, and they do the face paint, but they don't go any deeper than that. So I think they are doing the right thing. If it's not a feature that's being used, then they should keep Windows lean, because they are known for keeping features around for too long, aren't they?
They are. Moving on to turning to camera tech briefly, and I think this is just both of us have dabbled with cameras. I think you still do a bit more than me these days. Nikon, my last DSLR was a Nikon, has acquired the US camera manufacturer Red. Red famously brought, I think, the first 8K camera to market. They're well known in the feature film industry. I think Marcus Brownlee on MKBHD films all of his stuff with Red cameras, super high-end professional cameras at a reasonable price. So I think this is quite a sensible purchase by Nikon to keep them relevant in this kind of move to video more than still that's sort of taking over the world.
I'm amazed that Nikon's doing this, because Nikon, I've always been a Nikon supporter, I guess. I've had quite a few over the years, but I didn't see this coming, because Nikon doesn't seem to be a company that buys other companies. Fantastic. I think it's really good. Like I say, I really rate Nikon. I assume Red's very good, but yeah, it's an interesting one. I just, like I say, didn't expect us to be talking about this today.
So Red is an interesting company because it's the same guy that started Oakley sunglasses, started Red cameras. So he's obviously an optics guy. I have a lot of time for Oakley sunglasses. One of the best customer experiences of my life was when one of my Oakleys got damaged and they replaced the next pair for less than 50% off of anything in the range. And that happened to me twice, and I'd send them back for lens repairs and they'd just come back for free. So I had a lot of time for Oakley. So when he started a camera business, I was interested. Never owned a Red camera, but it's one of those things you think, oh, that's a really nice looking bit of tech. I'd quite like to play with one of them. And then you look at what there's, other than Marquez, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was filmed on them, Captain Marvel, Planet Earth's 2, Squid Game, Mindhunter, Peaky Blinders here in the UK. These are all quite high profile things that look amazing. So to get that sort of sheen these things have, particularly the latter seasons of Peaky Blinders, impressive company. Goodbye, Nikon. Good choice.
Yeah, I think good choice. It says it's going to be a subsidiary of Nikon, so I would assume they're going to keep the brand going. Maybe it is just going to be an entity in its own right, which would be great if it's just under the Nikon umbrella, as it were. So fantastic. And I think, to be fair to Nikon, in the mirrorless age, they've really upped their game and have delivered, some fantastic cameras. They seem to have gone in a new direction in more recent years, and a really positive one. So they needed a bit of a resurgence. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Moving on to a less good idea, I think. HP will now not only sell you a monthly thing to get ink down the line, but they'll actually, for $35.99 a month, give you a printer and ink and paper and let you print an amount of pages from that. I find this the most bizarre service that anybody could ever offer.
Yeah, I'm regretting my purchase of a HP printer a few years ago. I think I'm just not enjoying the company at all. It's a fine printer. It's always running out of ink, but I think HP is one of those companies that struggled to really find an identity in more recent years. I think they've got their enterprise networks. Didn't they buy a company? But they bought Juniper recently, didn't they? They used to own Palm. They used to, or still do, own Compaq, if I remember correctly. But they've just struggled. I think they were a big behemoth, but have never really been cohesive in what they're doing. That split between enterprise, consumer, and I don't think they've really made the services transition very well. I think most people feel a bit egregious against HP with some of the things they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They were one of the original Silicon Valley startups. They were very well regarded back in the day. Also started in somebody's garage, I think, a little bit before Apple. Quite a well-respected company, did lots of things, had their own version of Unix, HP UX. They bought medical devices. They bought a company called Agilent that made medical devices, including monitoring and all that kind of stuff. I ran HP software in one of the hospitals I worked in for a very long time, and they were a great company. And I think I've told the story before that when they merged with Compaq, you had a red guy would come or a blue guy would come, and a blue guy was an HP guy, and a red guy was a Compaq guy. Maybe that's the other way around. I forget now. But they wouldn't touch each other's stuff. Oh, that was a red server. I can't do that. So a lot of history around them, and they used to be a really strong company, but I think you're absolutely hit the nail on the head. They did not make the transition away from sort of more commoditized hardware very well, and the switch to services, they've not weathered that at all well either. And other than printers, I don't really think they're all that well known for many things. I think some of the laptops are vaguely well regarded, but there's better, cheaper, more reliable, less problematic companies, even if they're Chinese, that you can buy servers and desktops and things from than Hewlett-Packard these days.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I'm sure they've got some great products, but I don't know. It just feels like a company that's lost its way a little bit, like we say.
But, when we were talking last time about the CEO of HP saying, don't buy third-party printer cartridges because you'll get viruses in your computer. And now they want to rent you the whole widget. It seems like there's a story there.
Yeah, I agree. They're obviously forcing you one way. And there was a firmware update recently, probably within the time of us doing this podcast, where my printer now won't take third-party cartridges. So, they're obviously combating that area. I just don't think they're a fantastic company, and they're not innovating, are they? They're just turning out the same old tech. So, I agree with you. Not fantastic news.
No. In better news, the reviews came out for the M3 MacBook Air that we talked about, and it seems to be all good. It's exactly as predicted. It's a good laptop. It does a little bit more than the last one. It's a bit faster. Get one if you need one. If you've got an M1 or before, potentially. But if you've got an M2, don't bother. Seems to be the summary I read.
Yeah, and surely it's got to be, though, for most Apple reviewers. They've got the M3 Airs, and they've probably gone, I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know what sort of review you do on it. It's It's just the M2 one, but with literally the chip swapped out. I think everything else is pretty much the same. So it looks a great device. If somebody's buying a new laptop today, you're not going to change it for a long time. 100% go and get one of these. It'd be fantastic.
Yep. I have noticed a couple of people saying it's a bit sad. It's actually the death of the M1 shape. That classic wedge shape that the Air has always had, that now no longer exists in Apple's lineup, except in second-hand ones, obviously. But all the M2 and M3 ones are square, flat, the same as the design language of all Apple laptops in the last, since 2015.
Yeah, I can see it's a little sad, but I don't know. I think the Air is a fantastic device. So I would go and get one if I was buying a laptop today.
It makes you think, do you need a Pro laptop? The 99% of people need one of the Pro models when the M3 Air is as capable as it is. Spec'd appropriately, obviously.
Yeah, agree. You want a bit more RAM and a bit more storage in there. But no, I'm with you. I think the one thing the Pro does have is that slightly better ProMotion screen. For me, that's probably it was the last thing that pushed me over the edge, I think, between getting an Air and a Pro. It's just that slightly better screen. Because I probably don't need all the performance I've got, but the screen did push me over. And I think when it came down to it, the cost differential wasn't a lot between the Air and the Pro, because they do so many Pros now, and they're hitting every price point. But for me, the screen did it, the ProMotion screen, slightly higher res.
Fair enough. I mean, I wonder how many people would actually notice that weren't looking for it. You know, you've got an eye for it, then that makes sense. But I think your average consumer wouldn't notice that. What they want is to be able to have a portable computer that they can plug into one or two, now they can, displays. And this does that. I think it's a great laptop. We said at the time, I think the M2 was one of our models of the year last year, wasn't it? And when we talked about this at Christmas, so I think the M3 might be in with a shoe in this year as well.
Yeah, it's such a good laptop. And I'm glad they haven't changed really anything about it. It's just here it is with a better chip. Done.
Yeah, they can do some things right. Moving on, and this in ironic news, really, the European Commission has reported itself for infringing European Commission law, specifically with Microsoft 365. Basically, it's been sharing data inside Microsoft 365 that has gone outside of the EU, and that's a breach of the GDPR. So this is very bad. They might have to find themselves. Can you find yourself? I presume you can.
I guess they've got to hold themselves to account. So we should take some comfort in that they are self-reporting. Tick. They should treat themselves like anybody else. That's the right thing to do, and prove that the rules they uphold are the right rules.
Yeah, it's healthy, as you say, that they're able to do this kind of thing. So if they find themselves, they pay themselves. I guess another department when the EU gets it, though. But it's correct. They're policing their own rules. They're applying them evenly to themselves as well as others. It appears on the surface, and well done, the EU. And badly, a slap on the wrist, the EU at the same time.
Yeah, well done, the EU, for policing yourselves, but you shouldn't have done it in the first place.
Yeah, don't do it again. They've got till December the 9th, 2024, to put their house in order.
Wow, they give themselves a long time, don't they?
Well, you know, it's hard with corporate software to make sure you're doing all the things correctly, as Apple have discovered.
Yeah, true. I'll give them that.
Any more news?
No, I don't think so. I was saying to you before the show, I'm not very excited about any of the news at the moment. There's nothing. When's a company going to announce something really cool? So it just seems a quiet start to the year, and we're 3 months in now. So I don't know. I thought there'd be something more exciting. Maybe Microsoft might announce Windows 12. Nintendo might announce the Switch 2. Maybe PlayStation would announce some amazing update, or Apple would have brought some cool new stuff out. But everything's just all been a bit quiet for the first 3 months, I think. It feels more so than usual.
Incremental changes. I think it's going to be software for Apple this year rather than hardware. I mean, even if you get your new iPads, they're not going to be that exciting, are they? You might get some M3 chips and some flatter devices, but it's not going to be anything revolutionary. There's some new extra expensive hardware you can snap on them, maybe.
I think we're going to all be talking about AI come the summer once Apple have updated their software. Anyway, should we move on to media?
Let's do some media. I actually managed to watch a couple of things this week. Not play any games, and a spoiler for the next section, but we can talk about media for now. So I tried to watch episode 2 of Constellation, which was Apple's big new flashy thing starring Noomi Rapace. I reported the first episode was alright. It was better than Criminal Record, which isn't saying very much. It's not a very high bar. The second episode was super dull, and I gave up after 20 minutes. So that's the end of Constellation. I'm fed up of wasting my time watching disappointing television and sticking with it, and I get a disappointing ending. So there's enough other good stuff out there that I can swiftly move on. So just reporting back, really, Constellation, waste of time, avoid.
That is disappointing. Because I do want to get into some sci-fi. I think I'm going to plump for Foundation. I do want to read the books actually. So, don't say that. I like reading the book, but I'm going to try Foundation. I think that's my next thing to attempt.
I would absolutely try Foundation. It is a terrific show, great cast, amazing effects. I have not enough superlatives for Foundation. Actually, I think it was absolutely amazing. Constellation is not that. You could save yourself however many hours Constellation is going to be and just watch Gravity with Sandra Bullock from a few years back, which is a terrific film. Has more or less, has some of the same premise. Women abandoned in space. There's more to Constellation than that, it would like to think, but it's not as well done. And just enjoy Gravity instead. That's a great film.
It's quite a short film, if I remember correctly.
Well, there's a lot of drama in it. All sorts of stuff kicks off straight away.
No, agreed. But isn't it... it's 91 minutes long. Sorry, I was just looking at while we're talking, and which has been my gripe with a lot of things. They stretch it out into these TV series when actually a nice tight film would have done it. So it's 91 minutes. I was going to say I thought it was directed by Denis Villeneuve, but it's not. It's Alfonso
Cuarón.
I wasn't sure how to pronounce his last name. So that's been on my list to rewatch. Actually, I should try and slot that in because it's not a big time commit.
It's not. He's a great director. He directed the best Harry Potter film as well.
Which one did he direct?
Azkaban.
Prisoner of Azkaban. It was good, but it did deviate from the book quite a bit.
Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've talked about this before. Let art be itself. A film is not a book. A book is not a film. It's an interpretation of the written thing. Foundation, I was about to say, maybe don't bother with the books, is massively different from the books.
Okay.
So if you go in with an expectation of what it's going to be, then that's fine. I would say watch the films and then read the books by all means. Asimov was a genius. He wrote some amazing books, came up with the laws of robotics, all those kinds of things, and absolutely was foundational, pun intended. As a primary author within science fiction. So he absolutely is his place. But I think just go straight into the TV show. I think.
Okay, then that's what I will do.
Good. The second thing I managed to watch was Ferrari, which is a film by Michael Mann, who directed Heat, based on 1 year in Enzo Ferrari's life, which I didn't anticipate at all. I thought it was sort of a general overview of the Ferrari company or the man. I really had no preconceptions going in as to what it was. And it just tells the story of Enzo and his wife and his mistress and a couple of other bits and pieces that go on within the company over the course of a year. I won't give any more away than that. It's not really spoilers, it's historical events, and it's an interpretation of what happened to them in the same way as The Crown is of the royal family. Not bad. 7 out of 10. The suits are amazing. I got to say, the set dressing and all the rest of it is really good. Most of the special effects and the cars racing and sort of the historical authenticity of it is excellent. Adam Driver is off the charts as Enzo Ferrari. He's almost unrecognizable as Adam Driver. If I was trying to be super critical of it, I'm not 100% sure I like the sort of cod Italian accents they put on. I'd almost rather they hadn't bothered, but it's not so distracting as to take you out of the story, and it is quite a good story. Interesting guy, a compelling guy to have gone from being a racing driver to actually being the person that designed such Italian jewels that are described at one point in the film. And even if you haven't got a lot of interest in cars, it's quite an interesting story that it's told quite well. A bit too long, maybe. Some of the actual special effects when there's the odd crash, I really didn't like. Took me out of it slightly. But yeah, not a bad film. I'd say it's worth a watch.
This is good. So I've been wanting to watch this for a long time, and for whatever reason I haven't got around to it. So part of my frustration is I can't buy it here in the UK, and I think I said to you I was going to go to a local theatre, but sadly I couldn't make when it was on. But your review's better than I thought. I was concerned that the reviews have been quite mixed. Some complaints about slow motions and some of the action scenes. But actually, your review is better than I thought. I'm quite looking forward to it. I'm a big Michael Mann fan. I've watched a lot of his films repeatedly. And obviously interested in Enzo Ferrari. I think Adam Driver's very good. I like him in a lot of things. Because he was in House of Gucci, wasn't he? He played Mr. Gucci, I'm going to call him, for one of a better word. And I thought he was very good in that, to be fair to him. I think he's a really good actor. So no, I'm keen to see it, and I'm interested with your review. I think I might have to pick it up on Sky or something and watch it that way. It's odd how it's distributed here in the UK. I think I don't get why it's not just on the Prime or Apple stores, but there you go. So no, it's good. I'll put that on the list.
Put it on the list. So that's my review. Really. Also very good as Kylo Ren, but stand out with Denzel Washington's son David Washington in Black Klansman as well. He's absolutely terrific in that.
Oh, I didn't realise he was in that. I've not seen that film. But,
good film.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it.
So that's all I've got to say. Have you got a couple of things you've managed to watch?
So I do have a couple of things. So I actually watched American Fiction. I didn't realise, but this is on in the UK anyway. It's on Amazon Prime, so you can watch it for free, which was very easy to consume. And it's a film I'd heard a bit around. I watched the trailer before I watched the film and thought the trailer had some funny moments in it. But it's all about an author trying to get published in America, and he's just basically told his latest manuscript's no good. You need to try being more of a black author, and so he basically just writes some dribble, and people love it, and they want to publish it, and they want to make a film out of it and stuff. But I just thought it was actually a really, really good film, and it's not very long. It's just sub 2 hours, but no real action. It's just a good drama. But quite believable in that he writes a serious book, nobody picks it up. He writes something as a joke, it gets picked up and becomes quite big very quickly, and everybody's reading it. And the book is even called The F Word, is the title of the book, basically. So it just kind of shows, and you could just see this sort of thing happen, the stupidity of it. It just feel quite close to what real life could be. So would recommend. I thought it had a really good cast. And Jeffrey Wright's the key guy in it, and he plays Felix Leiter out of the James Bond or the more recent James Bond films. So would definitely recommend as an all-round show to watch, with obviously people that don't mind the F word, because there is some swearing in it.
He is a terrific actor, good as Felix Leiter, superb in the Westworld TV show. Which I don't want to give any spoilers about if people haven't seen it. It's not, first season's great, second season much less so, but he is stellar. He's a really good actor. I want to say he was in some DC things as well. Did he not play Jim Gordon
in the Batman?
In the Batman, and he's really good in that as well, actually.
Yeah, no, he fantastic. Genuinely, he came across well. He was great in James Bond. If I remember when he came up in Casino Royale as Felix Leiter, he was fantastic. So would definitely recommend, and like I say, it's low bar to actually watch it, because it's not a big time commit, and it's on Amazon Prime. So just nice to watch. I quite like a good dramatisation, and just thought it was a really good drama film. Just very easy watching.
Fair enough. Do you manage anything else?
I did do my homework. So I've watched Dune, and I'm calling it part 1 because I think they've gone back and relabeled it as part 1 now. Now part 2 is out.
It was always part 1.
Oh, okay. It was always part 1. So I actually bought this last year at some point, probably when Apple had a sale on. So that's how I consume this one. But I think it is available on Amazon Prime and other places. I hadn't seen it before, but I was aware of bits of it. It's fantastic. The cast, amazing. I think I said to you, every time there was a new scene and a new character, there was some other amazing actor to end up. But really good film, amazing effects, just the whole thing, fantastic, really good music. It's very enjoyable, reasonably long, a couple of hours, but great film. And I'd love to go to the cinema and watch Dune Part 2 if I can find somebody to go with.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it, really. It's quite an undertaking, isn't it? I think when you sort of settle into it and you realise how long it is, and you said, here's an actor, oh my gosh, there's another actor, and it is a cavalcade of very impressive performances from, Charlotte Rampling plays the Mother Superior, the Bene Gesserit at one point as well. The soundtrack is fantastic. It looks amazing. And did I tell this story last week? I can't remember. Where to get the authentic look of the film, they actually filmed it on digital cameras, scanned it back onto film cameras, and then put it back into digital cameras again. And that's such an undertaking just to get a particular look for something.
Yeah, that is commitment to your craft, isn't it? I think there. So Hans Zimmer does the music. It's got Jason Momoa in it, Javier Bardem. It's got what's his name, Dave Bautista. I don't.
Bautista.
Stellan Skarsgård's in it. Josh Brolin's in it. Oscar Isaac's in it, and Willy Wonka's in it. It's just insane.
Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya. You left out Zendaya.
Oh, Zendaya, yep, I forgot about it. That's down the bottom there. So, yeah, fantastic. So, 2 thumbs up. 100% would recommend, and I can't believe I've owned it for probably a year and not watched it.
Available on Netflix in the UK as well.
Oh, Netflix, there you go.
Yep. Good. Anything else in media?
No, I think I've done all right with my 2 films. I'm going to take that as a win.
We have done all right, although it sounds like you need to do Gravity again for next week, and maybe I do too, because I love that film.
I remember watching it a long time ago. It's fantastic. So, yeah, I think that's an easy one to sneak in.
I saw it in IMAX in an IMAX cinema and was blown away. It was terrific.
Yeah, fantastic. I've just watched it at home, I think, but even at home on a good quality OLED screen, it looks amazing.
There we go. Nothing in games for either of us, unless we want to talk about 3, Slay the Spire, or Call of Duty, I suspect.
No, but I think that reflects my state of tech at the moment. There's just, I don't know, there's not much that's really grabbed me on the Switch or the PlayStation that I've really wanted to go for. So I'm a bit disappointed, I think.
I did post a Lucas Pope game to you that's coming to your Playdate, I think.
Yep, I haven't looked at it yet, but that is one on the list. I do need to have a proper session on my Playdate, I think.
Yeah, it'd be good to get a little bit of feedback on your Playdate, because it's kind of gone quiet on that front.
It's still here, and it still is an amazing piece of hardware. It's aged well. The software is being continually updated. It needs to be charged apparently, so that's probably the constant state of my Playdate, which I'm sharing for everybody.
It's a cute little device. Shows the crank, actually. For video listeners, this is fascinating. I've never actually seen it. Is there a lot of resistance to the crank?
No, not a lot of resistance. Very smooth action. But you know what? It feels very well engineered. Not a lot of resistance, but just feels like it's not going to come away in your hand. It just feels really nice, solid. Quite a good fidget spinner when you're in a meeting, I would confess.
And you've given us a title for the show as well, so that's worked out really well. Moving on, main show, and I just thought it's kind of a grab bag of things we've been meaning to talk about for a little while, the main show this week, as well as an update on my sort of home lab shenanigans. First story is that the Linux market share has passed 4% for the first time, and this is actually pushing macOS back more than Windows back, and that, in light of everything we've been talking about with the DMA, is very interesting to me, that you're sort of seeing this growth in Linux, and I'm sure some of it is down to the Steam Deck as well, but that is quite an interesting thing.
Yeah, it is, and the Mac is significantly dropping, isn't it, in the last 6 to 9 months by the looks of things. It's just from November. I'd like to know what happened between sort of November and January, why it's dropped so much. It's a noticeable drop, isn't it? But yeah, and it did sort of peak in the middle of last year. It seems the Mac piece seems odd last year that it just rose so much for such a short period.
It is interesting. As I sort of take a step back from this, I slightly wonder for Mac users if a lot of people have been burned by the butterfly keyboard. They bought Macs in 2018, 2019, thinking these computers were going to do them for years, don't realise there's been a recall on them, are very cross about it. They've spent somewhere between $999 and $5,000 or pounds on a laptop, and it doesn't work anymore. And maybe they're looking for alternatives. They're techie enough to know they don't want a Windows computer again. They want something different, and maybe they're installing Linux on old PCs, or they're purposefully seeking out things like the Framework laptop that we talked about a couple of weeks back. So there may be sort of more complex things at play here.
Yeah, that's true. But looking at the graph, though, basically in the time of a year, Apple has just gone back to where they used to be. They started off at circa 16%, and they've ended around there, whereas they had a peak in the middle. And Microsoft have actually dropped as well, which is interesting. So it does feel like Linux may be making a slight indent. But maybe people want, not to be one of the big tech giants. They want to break away and do their own thing.
This is the year of the Linux desktop. It's very important to say every year that this year could be the year of the Linux desktop.
Yeah, it used to be a thing, didn't it? I think it never really quite made it, but clearly something's happening.
Well, as I say, your Steam Deck is a Linux desktop.
Yeah, that's true. I was just thinking about that. Linux is in more places than you realise.
It absolutely is, through Raspberry Pis and through all the other things. You can get into Linux for not an awful lot of money and have a play with it. And if you're vaguely tech curious, maybe that's what people are doing.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. It's great.
Anyway, interesting. Moving on, I thought we'd talk about some car stories, because we don't talk about that many of them, and you and I both have an interest in it. And I just thought this was one that's particularly interesting, given my car particularly, less so yours. In European crash tester Euro NCAP saying that cars have to have physical controls, otherwise they will be deducted NCAP points. Now, manufacturers really value this. They spend a lot of time, making crash-safe, pedestrian, I don't want to say friendly, less damaging, slippery shapes, so pedestrians will roll off the bonnet and not just smash into some big truck's grill. But they're saying physical controls have to come back because that's potentially dangerous as part of this. I think this is a great thing.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I like my car because I think it's got more or less the right balance. But there's a lot of cars that aren't like my car, and there's just too much on the screen that you just don't need, and you've got to do everything through the screen, which would drive me bonkers. And I think, to be fair to BMW, they're largely there. For me, it's just the climate controls are hidden behind a menu, which is the one thing that niggles me when I want to turn my heated seat on. Why is it not just a little button there on the dash? There's plenty of space. But I would concur with this statement. You don't want to be ferreting through a menu. And I certainly can imagine my parents going through menus to do things that they've done with a button for years. It's always been there in the middle. So, yeah, it's a no-brainer to me.
So I'm going to read a quote, then I'll talk about my experience. This is from Euro NCAP. The overuse of touchscreens is an industry-wide problem, with almost every vehicle maker moving key controls onto central touchscreens, obliging drivers to take their eyes off the road and raising the risk of distraction crashes. That's Matthew Avery, Euro NCAP's Director of Strategic Development. So my car, I have very few physical controls. The current edition of the Tesla Model 3 has a park, drive, neutral gear shift, effectively, on the right-hand side of the steering wheel. On the left-hand side of the steering wheel, I've got a indicator, full beam, and a screen wash button. Not wipers, screen wash. All I can do is blast the jets onto it. Every other function in the car, including opening the glove box, is handled by the touchscreen. So if I want to turn the heating on or off, I need to look over, because there is no speedometer in front of me either. Mine, that's on the touchscreen as well. You've got to look down and to the left to get the speed of the car, not just, there is nothing in front of you except dashboard and some grille to get to that. But it's worse than that, because there's no actual directional controls on the vents. If I want to direct it towards my face, I need to find that and then swipe a finger up and down on the touchscreen as well to mechanically move the motorized vents to get that to hit you in the face. So that's what's in the current version of the Tesla. The next version, if we were going by the same car today, doesn't even have those stocks. It has capacitive controls on the steering wheel for indicators, so that's gone, and it has, for the gear shift, swipe up or swipe down just under the speedometer on the screen to put it in forward or reverse.
Oh my good Lord. Why would you do it? I find it really interesting though, because I listened to Elon's book. We discussed it a couple of weeks ago. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And a big bit of his mantra is, for manufacturing plants, is make things simpler, make it simpler. Same with his rockets. And to be fair, it's what I quite liked about the book. He was like, why do we have to do that? Why does it have to have that rivet or this and that? And he was questioning every part of it. And his big mantra was make it simpler. Whereas it feels to me, all we've done with these screens is make it more complicated. So if I wanted to adjust the vents in my car, there's no electrics involved. There's no motor. It's just a manual, push the vent up and down. A bit of plastic moves. It just seems bonkers to me. And like I said, I do think BMW, to a degree, have got it right. They haven't gone too far. Maybe they went slightly far with the air conditioning controls, and I'd like my buttons back. But the rest of it is all available. There's loads in the computer if you want to go looking for it, but you don't have to. I was with a colleague yesterday. He's in an Audi Q4 e-tron, and it was flashing up, you need to reset your tyre pressures. He didn't know how to find the option. And he's a relatively young person, very tech savvy, but just didn't know where the option was. It was like, this is not right, is it? Why is it so complicated? Everything you've just said, though, I think has confirmed my decision. I am happy I didn't buy a Tesla, because I think that would be a bit egregious for me.
So most of it I've got no problem with, actually, because the car is fine. You can operate most of those things without too much distraction. I don't miss the speedometer not being in front of me. It's still within my line of sight. It doesn't bother me that much.
But you're still looking over to the left.
Yeah, right? But you have to look down at a speedometer anyway, unless you've got a heads-up display. So you're moving your eyes anyway. Right? Now, without being too much the Tesla apologist, I don't actually mind it too much. And to your point earlier about Elon simplifying things, his simplification is saving him money. He doesn't need to build electronics over the front of the dashboard to put a speedometer in front of your face, because he can just put it all on one screen. He doesn't need to build separate controls for the indicators because he's just putting it into the steering wheel. And you see other manufacturers doing this. Even Volvo, the king of safety, in their new EX30 have the same sort of thing where there are no even electric window switches on the door. They've centralized it all into the middle console. So you've got, if you're in the UK and you're driving, you put the window down with your left hand, not your right hand on the door. Now that's completely different to every car I've driven in years. You're up and down for your windows or on the door. But that puts all the wiring into one place on the car and all the functionality into the screen of the car. So the manufacturer saves money. Damn safety. And that's Volvo, who are the kings of safety.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember what the manufacturer was. I heard one manufacturer, I think they just had one button or two buttons to do the windows, but you had to flick it back and forth whether you wanted to do the rear windows and the front windows. I think people are changing stuff for the sake of change, and I think that needs to stop. It's
cost saving, and that manufacturer is Volkswagen, so the Q4 you were in yesterday would have been exactly the same because it's the same drivetrain.
Oh, it's just bonkers, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm with you on this.
Yep. So I just thought that was interesting. Anyway, moving on to a manufacturer that I have a love-hate relationship with. So Rivian, who make a big electric truck that goes very, very fast in America and Canada, but you can't get it anywhere else, have announced their next generation called the R2 and the R3. These are smaller, and of course they're SUVs, because that's what Americans buy, are SUVs and trucks, which are going to come in with a starting price of $45,000, not 60 time of 3 seconds. Looks like a Rivian, looks a bit like a Land Rover Discovery to me, actually, apart from the very Rivian face on it. Interesting. I hope it makes it out of America, because I think more EV manufacturers is good. I quite like Rivian as a brand for a couple of things. If you've watched The Long Way Up TV show with Charlie Berman and Ewan McGregor, they have 2 prototype Rivians that they just gave them to carry out that journey and put in a charging network. They seem to be taking it to Tesla in the sense that they are building a charging network the same as Tesla did. So, and they have a deal with Amazon that all Amazon delivery trucks are going to be powered by Rivian drivetrains. So it seems to me that this is an interesting company that's able to take it to Tesla, has taken some of the worst lessons from Tesla in the sense of there's no Apple CarPlay in Rivian vehicles and things like that. But it's interesting to see them expand the range.
Okay, so 2 things. One, I think they have released a software update for CarPlay. I thought I'd seen that somewhere this week, so I will need to check that. I'll do that in a minute. 2, I completely agree. I think they've done some quite cool designs. You know, they're not trying to be too modern and ridiculous. They're trying to be modern but still look like a car. I think they've got a really good product. I like their offering. Like you, I'd love to see them over here in the UK a lot more, but sadly we haven't. I don't think I've seen one over here in the UK. I don't know if they do models with the steering wheel on the other side, but I think they look fantastic and would love to see more of it.
Yeah, I think if you've got to have a truck, and again, they're not going to win Euro NCAP things for the shape of the vehicle. It's a large vehicle, so I think smaller ones are good. EVs are too big and too heavy, and this is a problem. But I'm with you. I quite like Rivian as a brand, I think.
Yeah, it does seem a really good brand.
Yeah. So that's interesting. It's nice to report on those kinds of things. New EVs are good. And speaking of new EVs, I think this is a particularly interesting thing. So Dacia, who make, basically Renaults with different wheelbases on them and a slightly different face, have announced the Dacia Spring, which is a EV, their first EV that's coming to the UK at least, and it starts at £14,995, which is the right price for a small electric vehicle, I think.
It is the right price, and there's not enough small electric vehicles because some people just need a small car that does a reasonable amount, but just more of a, nip round towns and don't need to drive out halfway around the country. So no, I'm not crazy about some of their design decisions, but this looks a great little car, to be fair. Dacia's owned by Renault, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
This looks a great car for the money. It's fantastic. These things will come down over time, but it does feel like it's taken a while to get them into a Fiesta-sized car here in the UK.
No, I think this is absolutely the right product. I mean, some might say it's still too expensive for a car with quite a small battery. Like you're going to get 136 miles or something out of it. Most journeys aren't 136 miles. That's enough to get you to work and back. 60-mile commute, 60 miles there, 60 miles back. This car is good enough for that, and most of us don't even commute that far.
Yeah, no, that's true. It looks like I was telling porcupines about CarPlay and Rivian. I apologise to our listeners.
No, I didn't think it was a thing. This, however, if you buy the more expensive model for $18,995, you can have Apple CarPlay in.
The Dacia.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, that is good. And I would recommend CarPlay to everybody. I just
We
think
know.
if you've got an Apple phone, though, it just means using your car, and you don't need to get distracted by using Bluetooth or the little phone. Just generally leave it in your pocket, and you can listen to your music. And I think it is safer for most people because they're not faffing around, with their phones as a lot of people do.
Fair enough. Anyway, I just think this is an interesting little vehicle. I'm glad to see cheap EVs in the market. Their next nearest competitor, I think, is the MG ZF, the Chinese one, and it starts at 26,000, something like that. So this is significantly cheaper. Good range. Well done, Dacia. Applause all round.
Agreed, 100%.
Good. That's our little. If we were the Upgrade podcast, we'd have a little door shutting now to show we'd finished it off. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my sort of descent into madness in my home lab, if you're interested.
I love that you're constantly changing your mind and buying new hardware.
I don't know if I'm changing my mind. I just like to try out new things, and I think it's important.
That's a better way of phrasing it.
As you get older, it's very easy to become stuck in your ways and just be the Apple fan or just be the Microsoft fan or I only listen to this kind of music or whatever it is that you decide to do. And if I'm not pushing myself and learning new things, I think I'm going to become very stagnant. So I quite like seeing what the market's got.
That's fair. And you're better at that than me, I think.
So what I did was I've been running a Proxmox server. I've talked about it on this show before now, which is a hypervisor client, type 1 hypervisor that lets you run multiple virtual machines on one piece of bare metal. I used to have an old PC that I did, but I've repurposed that to be my NAS, my true NAS, when I went through my whole upgrade my network and I wanted files to move around faster piece, which meant my Proxmox server became an old 2007 Mac Mini. So it was an i5 with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of SSD, and it wasn't very good for very, very much. So that's been bothering me. So I thought, right, it's time to upgrade. And I went and I looked on Amazon and the link's in the show notes, and I bought a Beelink SER5 for the grand total of £279, which gives you a 12-threaded 4 gigahertz processor with 16 gigs of RAM and a 500 gig SSD, which I think is not bad for that amount of money. And it's literally, I don't know, Apple TV size, a little bit thicker than an Apple TV. It's a very, very small box.
Seems a lot of computer for the money.
It's a huge amount of computer for the money, and I very quickly thought 16 gigs of RAM is not enough, so I whipped that out and I put in 32 gigs. That was another £64, and it's got a slot on the top for an SSD. I know, 64 gigs of RAM for 32 gigs of RAM, sorry, for 64 quid. What would Apple charge me?
Oh, hundreds. Easy.
Hundreds. There's a slot on the top for a 2.5-inch hard disk, so I had a 2 gig SSD hard disk lying around, so I just slotted that into it. So now I've got really quite a powerful little computer.
I think you mean 2 terabytes, not 2 gig.
2 terabytes is exactly what I mean. So that little box the size of an Apple TV is now a server. I can run 12 threads on it. It's got 32 gigs of RAM. It's got 2.5 gigs of SSD storage. I can run lots of virtual machines on that. So while I'd done this upgrade, I was thinking, I've used Proxmox for a long time. It's open source. There's been a lot of interest in the community at the moment because of VMware pulling back Hyper-V to open source hypervisors because lots of people are moving to them. And this one keeps coming up. It's called XCP-NG, which used to be a Citrix product called Zen, was the hypervisor, and this is the open source version of Zen. And I've been blown away by how good this thing is, actually. It's almost entirely web-based, so it installs a little machine on it so you can do simple things like start and stop virtual machines and see the overview of what's going on with it. But it immediately wants to install a thing called Zen Orchestra, which is also open source, although they will try and sell you an upgrade model, but you can build from sources and have the open source version of running. And the utility it gives you for the Zen Orchestra piece is incredible. Nice web-based interface, you can control your VMs, install them, ISOs, start, stop, add network interfaces, memory, all that kind of stuff. It's hugely comprehensive for what you can do in the web interface. A bit cluttered, if anything, actually, but really quite impressive. But it lets you do things that VMware charge you huge amounts of money for. So you can cluster up to 64 machines in a cluster with an open source piece of software with little machines like this. So you could have a cluster of machines for 900 quid that would give you a high availability uptime, even if you were starting new with the Beelink thing I bought. But of course, it's software that will run on old hardware going back to whatever. Very easy for you to upscale if you need this kind of thing. I don't. I just want to run a couple of virtual machines, some dashboards, and things like Jellyfin and server software and all that kind of stuff too on my VM. So this works really well for that. It gives you NFS storage, so if you've got a NAS lying around, you can store your virtual machines on them. You can have live migration between the various machines in the cluster. You can do VMware cloning of live machines and snapshots. And you can build, this is really cool, if you've got a running machine and you think that's a good Debian or Ubuntu server or even a Mac server, if you have, because you can run that on them too. You can right click and say clone this machine. It will clone it in space without taking down the existing machine. Generate a new MAC address for the one you're cloning from. And you can have another machine up and running almost instantly if you wanted to have another piece of software running. Really impressive. And it supports things like VLANs and all the rest of it as well. I'm just really impressed. Considering I really like Proxmox and I knew it quite well, this is just fantastic.
So while you were talking, I was just looking through their website. For an open source piece of software, it's fantastic, isn't it? The offering, the documentation, it looks really comprehensive. It's amazing what is open source these days.
It really is, and like I said, what's built into it is just phenomenal. That ability to start and stop, it blew my mind actually when I right clicked and went, I could just clone from this machine. So if you build the perfect install of, I don't know, for a Docker server or something like that, if you're trying to learn how to do a bit of networking or understand what Docker is, or run your own Jellyfin server or your own audiobook server or whatever, this lets you do that. Just go, I've got perfect install, I want to get something, I've got 10 minutes to get a whole server up and running. Bang, you can do it as simple as that. Really impressive piece of software.
Yeah, and there's, like I say, there's lots of documentation, there's lots of constant releases by the looks of things. So, yeah, it looks good. I wish I had your enthusiasm I think to play with this sort of thing, but I don't seem to have the time or the enthusiasm at the moment.
Well, there you go. I'll keep you up to date on what's going on with it. But I'm really impressed. So it's a little journey for me, learning a new hypervisor, new piece of hardware. Works really, really well. I'm very pleased with it.
That, like I say, the hardware thing just blows my mind how relatively cheap that is. That's a lot of device for £280.
And it's a very well designed little piece of hardware. There's 4 screws in the bottom. You unscrew them, the lid pops off, and you've got access to branded. It was Crucial RAM that was already in it. You know, it was a Samsung SSD that was already in it. It wasn't any sort of cheap knockoffs of any sort. It was well branded and stuff that was in it that's easily accessible. You know, it's other than 4 screws, it's tool free once you're in.
That is very good.
Yeah, really pleased with it. While I was at it, I made a discovery. I bemoaned before about my Synology NAS, which we use to do the show notes and things on, only being 1 gig. I have found a YouTube project, a GitHub project that will let you install a USB-C to 2.5 gigabit Ethernet adapter in your Synology and turn it into a 2.5 gig. So I think I've solved that problem. So that's my project for this week, is to get that up and running.
Yeah, that's kind of cool, isn't it? Because if you've already got the Synology for £20 you can just convert it and have a much faster network. I've not done anything with upgrading my network. I've kind of paused at the moment because I think I'm waiting for the switch. I think the switches will come down, the managed switches that I want to get. So I'm just waiting to see, because I think it's going to become more prevalent over the year.
So on that note, and you'll find in the show notes, the thing I kind of want to get next, which is the Unify Ubiquiti Pro Max 24, which for the price of, well, including VAT, £430 is a 24-port layer 3 switch with 8 gigabit, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports, 16 1 gigabit Ethernet ports, 2 10 gigabit SFP ports, and it's got cool lighting as well. So now we're talking for the kind of thing you want as your backbone.
Wow. I mean, the cost is coming down significantly, and I think that will just continue, but yeah, it's still a reasonable amount of money, isn't it?
It's not nothing, but Ubiquiti devices are some of the best on the market, I'd say. Mine have been bulletproof since I put them in. I wish this had been available then. I use PoE, power over Ethernet, to power my switches, to power a couple of cameras and things like this. This would give me the upgradability of having a few more 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports. And the fact that it's got 2 10s on there as well means when 10 becomes more prevalent or 5 becomes more prevalent, the switches are able to talk to each other at a higher bandwidth.
Yeah, no, it does look really good. Like I'm still in the mindset I want to do it, but I'm just waiting, I think, for the cost to come to the right place.
And I'm just going to say again, these switches are a new generation. They've got this thing called ether lighting, which is like a Knight Rider thing you can apply to the LEDs on the switches, so you can get them to flash particular colors when you go down there, or to give you a pattern rolling back and forth amongst the switches to show what's going on, which is just really cool.
Yeah, there's some cool tech out there, isn't there, like that? It's quite neat.
See, there are cool things out there, Chris. You just need to look in different places.
I think I'm just too tight at the moment to spend the money. I'm saving for my iPad because it's going to be expensive.
And it'll change your life. I think that's it for me, intro, unless you got any questions about any of that nonsense I talked.
No, I quite enjoyed it, actually. It's kind of back to our roots of tech, isn't it? Because part of me was thinking the Synology thing that you mentioned. I wonder if that would work for me with a USB 3 Ethernet adapter for the higher speeds, because I'm fairly confident my Synology's got USB 3. So I'm going to go and have a look at that, because I would like a slightly faster backbone without actually buying a new Synology right now. Because if I've got to buy a new Synology, some new switching, upgrade my internet, which is all things I'm going to do, I'm just trying to sequence everything correctly. So yeah, I'm going to go away and have a look at that, I think.
So on that note, I better put in the show notes for the listeners the link to the GitHub project that lets you do this to your Synology. It's by a person called BBQ, and it's for the R8152 driver, but you can put a 2.5 gig Ethernet USB-C to Ethernet, or a 5 gig if you think you can get away with that on your network.
Wow, 5 gig. It does feel like this is the year where we're going to go past having the 1 gigabit backbone, because I'm seeing a lot more internet offers for over a gigabit internet, and obviously if you're going to do that, you need the internals to be bigger than that, really. So it's super interesting where it's all heading.
Yeah, you've got really fast disks inside of these things generally, and then you'll limit them through a 1 gigabit Ethernet connection. So as long as you've got USB 3.1 on the device, you can plug in one of these things with an 8C adapter and you're off to the races.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? So the speed that we have at homes now is just insane to me. It's mind-blowing, especially if you think where we've come over the last couple of years. For me, like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I had rubbish internet. It didn't have great Wi-Fi, whereas Wi-Fi's really got to a great place. People are adopting the newer standards a lot quicker. You can get much faster broadband, and now obviously Ethernet's going to be 2.5 times as quick as what we generally have had for the last 10 years. So yeah, it's really encouraging.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Moving on, app of the week. Quite a simple, well, it's not a simple one if you need it. This week it's called Disk Drill. I downloaded it as a means of visualizing used space. I seem to have a lot of skiing videos taking up my hard disk space on my Mac, so I was a bit, where's all that then? And I had a look. Really nice little thing for visualizing it. You can do it on a directory level, just so you use a directory. You can do the whole Mac if you want to. You can right-click. This is the free version. You can right-click on things and it'll tell you where they are, how big they are. It'll take you right to them in the Finder if you want to explore them. If you hover over it, if it's a video, you can actually play it from within the application as well. It's just really well designed. It's also an undeleter. So if you have cocked up and delete something off your Mac that you didn't mean to, it's a file recovery mechanism as well. So the free version has been good enough for me so far. I haven't deleted anything that I've needed to recover. Just a very well-written app that looks very pretty. So Disk Drill.
And I quite like the web page. They've got an icon for the old version of Microsoft Word and Pages and things. It's quite interesting seeing some of the retro icons, which I quite like. No, it looks good. I probably don't use my Mac enough, but it looks a nice bit of software. It looks well made.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with it. It's quite a flexible thing. It's good. Quite a terrifying name, Disk Drill, but it actually is it's a useful utility to have in your Mac.
Yeah, it more sounds like a way that you would completely erase your disk, so that if you were selling a computer, all your data would be completely removed from it or overwritten. That's what that name suggests to me.
Yep. Have you got a thing of the week?
Yeah, so I have got a thing of the week. Now, this is untested. I haven't bought one yet, but planning to. This is a new Logitech MX Brio. We all know I like Logitech devices, but I am after a webcam because I talk to you every week. I have to plug my iPhone in. Apple's support is not fantastic. I think let's just put it that way. But this actually looks a great camera. It seems to replace their previous Brio range. The plastic looks a little plasticer than it has done in the past, but the camera looks great spec. It's £220. I've got one sat in my basket on Amazon, and I will wait for it to drop in price a little bit, and then I'll be sure to pick one up. But I thought it looked good, and I do like Logitech stuff. It generally plays well with the Mac, but I think that'll be a good addition. Even if I ever get a new studio display and bring the old one over here, the camera's not great on it, as we've discussed. This would be a great addition irrelative of what screen I use. So I've got my eye on one of those. I just thought I'd show it because it looks great, and it would work with the iPad as well for apps that support third-party webcams. Teams still does not, which is my biggest gripe. But just think it looks fantastic, and thought I'd share that.
Yeah, the reviews have been good. There's some sort of AI stuff built into it as well if you want to use that to make your hair look a bit better and things like that. If you choose to use it and use their software failing that, I think it's just a fairly solid webcam. I think we're underserved with good 4K webcams. They're too expensive. This is still a bit expensive.
It's a little expensive, but if you're on webcam calls all day, every day, it's not that bad a price, is it, to pay? I don't think.
You do want to look your best.
Will it give me more hair because I haven't got any hair? So it can maybe change the colour, but it's the having some would be good.
I bet there's a plug-in to give you hair.
Least of my problems, I think.
Zoom has one to give you green eyebrows, so I'm sure it can give you hair if you want.
Yeah, fair play. But anyway, that was it. That was my thing of the week.
I think we can call that a show, Chris.
I think so. Thanks, Rod. And look, if anyone wants to get into contact, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CJP@mastodon.social. You can contact us on YouTube at ht.ly/7w5ta or drop us an email wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.